A story was being told in the small villages of Galicia. If the seventh child born of a union was a girl, she would turn out to be a witch. But if the child was a boy, he would be cursed to turn into a werewolf. On the 18th of November in 1809, such a seventh child was born. Her name was Manuela Blanco Romasanta, although that wouldn't be her name for very long. Manuela was born with a rare condition of intersexuality, so when Manuela turned 6, a doctor declared her to be a boy. And even though his name wouldn't be changed in the church register until his 8th birthday, he from now on lived as Manuel. Now these were of course very different times, and no one ever thought to ask Manuel what he thought his gender was. So while I tell you his story, I will be referring to him as him, because that's what he went by. Not much is known about Manuel or his life, or even his family. What we do know is that Manuel was considered quite feminine in looks, minus of course his beard and excessive hair growth all over his body. We also know that the people that knew him described him as small in frame, almost fragile, and at only 1.37 meters or 4.49 foot, he was small, even for the times he lived in. He was described as excelling at feminine traits, such as sewing and cooking, but we can put that down to the fact that he was raised as a girl until the age of 6, and in the 19th century, children learned such things very early on, because they had to help their families out. We also know that Manuel could read and write. That was something very unusual for a time where most adults couldn't do that. There are 2 theories about this. One is that his family was very well off, rich to put it mildly, but there's no evidence for that. Manuel grew up in a small village. It's much more likely that his parents were farmers, and that because of his small stature, he couldn't help them on the fields. So he went to church, where the local priest taught him to read and write. But the truth is lost in time, as are many things in this case. Manuel was popular in the community he lived in. He was considered devoted to the Catholic Church, and when he was 21, he got married to a girl from the neighboring village by the name of Francisca. Their wedded bliss wouldn't last for very long though. Only 3 years after they got married, Francisca would die. The reason for her death would forever remain a mystery, and to this day it's highly debated whether Francisca was actually Manuel's first victim. But that's neither here nor there, because we just don't know. What we do know is that Manuel's life would change from now on, quite drastically. While he was married, and I assume even before, he worked as a tailor, and as the people later said, he was very good at his job. But apparently he wanted to change, and he wanted to leave the village he lived in with his wife. Manuel started working as a traveling salesman, selling everything, from pots to fabrics to tinctures that he brewed himself to cure diseases of any kind. A job that would take him as far as Portugal. He also worked as a guide for people that wanted to cross the mountains of Castile, Asturias, and Cantabria. And so a few years passed, until in 1843, Manuel made a debt with a supplier, which he either didn't want to pay back or just couldn't. So the constable of Leon, Vicente Fernandez, went to look for Manuel to collect his debt, or I assume to put him in prison, which was usual at the time for people that couldn't pay their debt back. Only a few days after Vicente went to look for Manuel, his body was found, hidden in the shrubs of a forest. As they would later say, it looked like Vicente got attacked by an animal. The authorities still tried to find Manuel, but by the time they found Vicente's body, Manuel had already fled. He got himself a new passport under the alias Antonio Gomez. Nonetheless, he got sentenced in absence to 10 years in prison for Vicente's murder. From this day on, Manuel was on the run, and would continue to be for 10 years. In this time, Manuel continued to work as a salesman and a guide, but he also took odd jobs like working on farms, making yarn and cooking, and he befriended the women of the villages he stayed in. One of his employees, a farmer by the name of Allariz Blanco, would later recount that Manuel was patient and funny, and that he would do everything he got told to do. Everything but one thing. Manuel steadfast refused to slaughter any animals. He told Andres that he just couldn't stand the sight of blood. Around this time, he met Manuela and her sisters. Manuela was in her mid-40s, and with 37, she had given birth to a daughter. She had been married twice, widowed once, and as she had told Manuel, she had no clue where her second husband had run off to. Manuel managed to charm Manuela, to the point where she was willing to do everything for him, even give him money. Manuel told her that he was in serious debt and needed help paying it off. So Manuela told him she would go and sell a house she owned in a neighboring village, while her daughter stayed with Manuel. We know that she left them on the 13th of March, 1846, but when she returned, her daughter was gone. Manuel told her that he took her daughter, Petra, who was only 15, to a priest in Santana, a big city, where she could learn and work. And Manuela clearly believed him. Then he also talked her into going and joining her daughter. She packed all her belongings and left with him, never to be seen again. To avoid suspicion, Manuel went as far as to write letters in his victims' names, and he brought them to the village when he returned. Letters that were filled with praise for the big town and all the wealth that could be collected there. And so it came that Benita, Manuela's younger sister, also wanted to go and find her fortune in the city. She and her 9-year-old son, Francisco, went with Manuel. They would also never be seen again. Manuel then started an affair with a woman named Antonia, and he would also lure her and her 11 and 3-year-old daughters into the woods with the promise of the big city. Next would come Josefa, the third sister of Manuela and Benita. She sent her 20-year-old son off with Manuel first. Then she also followed him. All in all, 9 people disappeared in a span of 4 years. Manuel had found the perfect way to survive. He would lure his victims into the Sierra de San Mamede, where he would kill them. The wolves that lived there would do the rest. But he wouldn't leave everything of his victims to the wolves. Their belongings he sold, and parts of their bodies he used to make tinctures, a trade that would give him his other name, Sacamantecas, the fat extractor. He would harvest his victims' fat and sell it to pharmacies, or make tinctures out of it. Manuel's greed would ultimately be his downfall. He wasn't very careful about what he brought back into the villages his victims had lived in. He bought the head of Jofesa's son and a scarf that had belonged to one of the sisters. When the villagers questioned him, he told them they had given it to him, that they were so rich now they just didn't need it anymore. But Manuel had made a mistake. He hadn't killed the last relative of the sisters. Their brother also lived in the village, and one day Manuel brought something with him that Jose, that was his name, knew his sister would have never given away, a knife given to her by their father. And as he would later tell the court, when he saw Manuel ram the knife into a loaf of bread, he saw him for what he really was, a monster. In 1852, a formal complaint was lodged into the city Escalona. Who made the complaint? We don't know. Maybe it was Jose, maybe someone else. But we do know what was in it. Manuel was accused of luring women and children to go with him into the woods, so he could kill them to harvest their fat and sell it. Manuel must have suspected that people were growing suspicious of him. He counterfeited another passport and ran away again. Unfortunately for him, it was farming season at that time, and many people were traveling the roads for work, and one of them recognized him. He was arrested in September of 1852 in Nombela, a province of Toledo, and brought to court in Allariz. But Manuel had one last trick up his sleeves. As soon as he got arrested, he claimed to be a werewolf. Before we talk about this trial, we have to talk about the circumstances surrounding everything. Galicia, which was where the trial took place, was still in the tight grasp of one of the worst famines ever recorded. The lack of food not only made the people turn to mass migration, but it also led to an incredible increase in mental illnesses, or as they put it, insanity. And the people of that time were also incredibly superstitious. I told you about the myth of the 7th child before. A lot of people believed in those things. So when we look at this trial and later Manuel's sentence, and at the people that ultimately came to his defense, it's important to note that times were just very different. And if you had a good enough story, you could get away with murder. But let's not jump ahead. Manuel was put on trial for the murder of 13 people, and immediately he claimed that he was the victim, a victim of lycanthropy. I'm going to read you now a statement out of his own mouth. The first time I transformed was in the mountains of Cusco. I came across 2 ferocious-looking wolves. I suddenly fell to the floor and began to feel convulsions. I rolled over 3 times, and a few seconds later, I myself was a wolf. I was out marauding with the other 2 for 5 days until I returned to my own body, the one you see before you today, Your Honor. The other 2 wolves came with me, who I thought were also wolves, changed into human form. They were from Valencia. One was called Antonio and the other Don Gennaro. They too were cursed. We attacked and ate a number of people because we were hungry. The court also called forth many experts who came to the conclusion that Manuel wasn't crazy or simple of mind. In fact, they said he meticulously planned the murders, from where he would kill his victims to whom he would kill. He killed for profit. As you can imagine, the prosecution asked Manuel to show them his transformation. Of course, Manuel couldn't turn into a wolf. And of course, he also had an explanation for that. An explanation that if the court found him to be suffering from lycanthropy, would also set him free. Because let's say Manuel could turn into a beast, that means they couldn't let him go, because he would just kill again. But Manuel had an answer for that. He said the curse that was on him lasted only for 13 years. And those 13 years had run out, very conveniently on the 25th of July in 1852, about 1.5 months before his trial started. And I don't want to not tell you what his defense attorney said. He claimed that just because Manuel claimed to have killed these people, there's no proof that he actually did it, which, even though a strange defense, considering Manuel never denied killing 13 people. In fact, he willingly confessed to it. There was actually no physical proof that he had done it. In fact, most of the bones that were found couldn't even be identified towards belonging to any of the victims. And they could have fallen victim to an actual wolf attack, as was claimed by the defense. His attorney said Manuel believed himself to be a wolf because of all the superstitions that he grew up with. Manuel, throughout the entire trial, was prodded and poked by many scientists. They measured his head, his extremities, even tried to feel around for his organs. But they couldn't find anything out of the ordinary. No broken bones or scars that would point towards a transformation. So on the 6th of April, 1853, Manuel Romasanta was charged with the murder of 9 people. Ironically, he wasn't charged with the murder of the other 4 because their remains showed signs of a wolf attack. Take that as you want. He was sentenced to death by garrote, which is a device that strangulates the victim. By this point, all of Spain, and probably a lot of the world, had heard about this trial. Everyone, including 2 people. One was the Queen of Spain, and we'll get to her in a minute, and another one was a doctor, a Mr. Phillips, who claimed to be an expert in electrobiology and magnetism, a hypnotist. There is actually no real evidence about who this man was. We do know his name was very likely not Mr. Phillips. In fact, the most likely suspect is a French doctor and spiritualist by the name of Joseph Pierre Durand de Cron. He wrote to the Department of Justice of Spain and the Queen to ask them to be allowed to examine Manuel personally. He claimed that Manuel did in fact suffer from lycanthropy, and that he could force him to turn into a wolf by stimulating certain parts of the brain. He even claimed that he knew of other cases of lycanthropy. He wanted Manuel to be given to science instead of being killed. As I said, Queen Isabel of Spain got involved. And by royal decree, on the 13th of May, 1854, Manuel's sentence was changed to life in prison without parole. There is no evidence that this Mr. Phillips ever actually came to Allariz. It's very likely that he didn't after studying the case more thoroughly, because according to Mr. Phillips, the turning into a wolf was spontaneous. But we know that there was nothing spontaneous about Manuel's crimes. He planned them. He lured his victims to remote places to kill them. According to Mr. Phillips' theory, Manuel shouldn't have been able to control his turning, so at some point he could have as well transformed in the town square, but that never happened. Manuel Blanco Romasanta died in prison on the 14th of December in 1863. We only have one single source of information about his death, a newspaper clipping that survived long enough to be archived. In it, it was claimed that Manuel died of stomach cancer, and that he spent his last days knitting and praying. He was 54 when he died. Like his life, there's also a lot of mystery surrounding his death. Some claim that he got shot by a prison guard who wanted to see him transform into a werewolf. All we know for sure is that he did die, and that according to his own admission, he killed 13 people, including children, brutally. So what do you think about the mysterious case of the Werewolf of Spain? Do you think he did have some supernatural powers? Or was he just incredibly smart and tried to get out of his convictions by playing into people's superstition at the time? And what about the other 2 men that he also accused of murder in his statements? And there is the fact that no weapon was ever found, and Manuel was described as being small and not particularly sturdy or strong. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I hope to see you again in my next video. Stay safe, and remember not to follow anyone in the woods. You never know what beast might be lingering there.